In the autumn of 2025, a young English musician named Sonia Exelby boarded a plane at London Heathrow and flew alone, unannounced, to Gainesville, Florida, and 2 days later, when she was supposed to fly home, she never showed up, and the horrifying truth of what happened to her would unfold through shallow graves, deleted videos, a mailed knife, and 2 years of dark messages exchanged with a stranger across the ocean. Sonia was 32 years old, a pianist, singer, and music teacher from Portsmouth, England, a historic port city on the south coast in the county of Hampshire, where she lived with her longtime partner Stevie, an artist she had been with for nearly 15 years, and their beloved cat Meryl, and by all outward appearances she was a creative and gentle soul who composed original music, posted her performances online, and spent her days teaching piano, guitar, and flute to students. But beneath that surface, Sonia had been struggling deeply with her mental health, a reality that her family and friends were aware of, and one that had, in the years before her death, drawn her into the darkest corners of the internet, where she had been communicating with individuals who told her they were willing to hurt her or end her life. And in 2024, one such attempt to meet a person from those online spaces had already been discovered and stopped before it could go further, after which Sonia had sought treatment and, in the weeks and months before October 2025, those closest to her believed she was improving, that the worst chapter was behind her, not knowing that for 2 full years she had been exchanging messages on fetish websites with a user who called himself Darkwolf, a man who lived in Ocala, Florida, with his longtime partner Ginger, who had recently survived a double lung transplant after being diagnosed with a rare disease that caused scar tissue to develop in her lungs, leaving the couple drowning in medical debt. And that man was 53-year-old Dwayne Hall, the sole owner and employee of a roadside assistance company called Silverwolf Roadside. And over 2 years of escalating conversations online, Dwayne and Sonia had discussed scenarios of abuse and death in graphic detail, until eventually the conversation moved from fantasy towards something with a date and a destination, and Sonia, without telling Stevie or her family, made travel arrangements, booked a flight to Gainesville, rented an Airbnb in the small town of Reddick, and on the evening of October 10, 2025, she landed at Gainesville Regional Airport, where license plate readers would later confirm that Dwayne Hall's Jeep was present to collect her. And within hours of her arrival, the horror that Sonia may have believed she was walking toward willingly began to consume her completely, because on October 11, while she was being held at the Airbnb, she managed to send a desperate message to a friend in a frantic, sometimes barely coherent stream of words that read, "He keeps taking my phone. He doesn't trust me with it. He made it clear there was no way unless I shoot him. I was questioned last night. I can't kill anyone. He's in the shower but I'm locked in, and there is no signal in the middle of nowhere. I'm so scared, I'm so broken and in so much pain. All I can do is lay here doing what he wants. I'm sorry, I don't even know what I'm saying, my time's up." And those words, so raw and terrified, paint the picture of a woman who had arrived thinking she understood what she had agreed to, but found herself imprisoned, injured, and utterly alone, while Dwayne, according to evidence later gathered from his own phone, recorded at least one video of Sonia seated on a chair in the rental, wearing the same floral dress she had worn when boarding the plane at Heathrow, her head down, tears in her eyes, visibly injured, and reluctantly nodding as Dwayne's voice in the background asked her repeatedly whether she had asked for the treatment she was receiving and whether she wanted what was happening to her. A recording he deleted just 3 seconds after saving it, stating that she was not behaving the way he wanted her to on camera. And by October 12th, the day Sonia's return flight to England was scheduled to depart without her, Dwayne left the Airbnb and Sonia did not leave with him alive, because investigators using cell phone location data were later able to pinpoint an area in the woodland near the community of Marion Oaks, Florida, where Dwayne had told detectives he had pulled off the road and parked for roughly an hour on his drive home that Sunday, claiming he had been followed by a suspicious tan or silver sedan, and it was in that woodland, in a shallow grave, that on October 17, 2025, law enforcement made their grim discovery, pulling from the disturbed earth the body of Sonia Exelby, who had sustained 4 stab wounds to her torso, bruising across other parts of her body, and an abrasion to her neck. And buried alongside her was the label from a shovel, the same shovel that had been purchased at a Walmart by Dwayne Hall days earlier and later found in his garage, with blood on the blade that was DNA matched to Sonia. And the investigation had begun not with a body but with a bank transaction, because when Sonia failed to board her flight home and her family in England raised the alarm, Hampshire police contacted Interpol and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement began tracing her movements, finding a trail of curious financial activity, including 7 declined charges in a 10-minute window just after midnight on October 11th. All made to a company called Solver Wolf's Roadside Assistance, followed by a completed charge of $1,200 on a second card the next day to the same business. And when investigators called Dwayne Hall to ask about a missing British woman, he told them her card had declined and he had never gone out to help her, a lie that immediately began to unravel because the $1,200 charge had gone through, because license plate readers placed his vehicle at the airport the night she arrived, because a neighbor at the Airbnb had spotted a black SUV with an emergency roadside sticker parked at the property all weekend, and because transactions for food found in the rental's trash, Dunkin' Donuts, coffee, a gas station sandwich, strawberries, all traced back to Dwayne Hall's bank card. And when detectives brought him in for questioning, Dwayne delivered an astonishing performance across nearly 6 hours of interrogation, spinning an elaborate story about a mysterious Middle Eastern client named Harold who had hired him to work on celebrity cars under a non-disclosure agreement, naming Tom Cruise and John Travolta as the kind of high-profile individuals whose vehicles might be involved, claiming that all digital records of the job had been mysteriously wiped from his phone, that he had been followed home by a suspicious car that circled the woods where he had parked, and that Sonia had been Harold's client, dropped off at the Airbnb and picked up by another man. Though each version of his story changed the moment investigators presented new evidence, and when they told him the rental had been booked in Sonia's name, he produced a new version in which they had both stayed there but at different times. And when they told him they could place them there simultaneously through devices and forensic evidence, he admitted they had been together, that they had been physical, that he had been mentoring her online about her relationship, but insisted he had not wanted anything to happen because his wife's illness had changed him and that dark side of him had gone quiet. And when he was finally told about the shallow grave, he asked if they had found her, as though he did not already know precisely where she was. And the final detail that sealed the case came from a friend of Dwayne's named Rick in Ohio, to whom Dwayne had mailed a package in the days after Sonia's murder with a note asking Rick to hold it for 6 months in case the storm passed, telling him not to open it. And inside, investigators found a bracelet and a knife with a 7-inch blade, a gift that had been engraved with the words, "Dorkwolf, pointy end goes in the other guy," a play on Dwayne username Dark Wolf, and the blade tested positive for blood with a DNA match to Sonia Exelby. And Rick told investigators that Dwayne had told him he had helped Sonia die, but that Rick himself had no doubt it was murder, and Dwayne Hall was arrested, charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping, held without bond, and is expected to stand trial in 2027 unless a plea deal is reached, with prosecutors arguing that he had spent 2 years grooming a vulnerable woman who was suffering from extreme mental illness, exploiting her darkest impulses to lure her across the Atlantic and carry out a violent fantasy. And notably, law enforcement in the United Kingdom required that the death penalty be taken off the table before they would share evidence with Florida prosecutors, meaning Dwayne Hall now faces life in prison if convicted, while Sonia Exelby is mourned deeply by those who loved her. And in December 2025, her partner Stevie ran the Portsmouth Marathon in her memory, raising money for cats protection, a cause that had been incredibly important to Sonia, honoring a woman who had played piano in living rooms, composed songs she shared with the world, and was failed not by the people who loved her, but by the darkness that found her online and made the journey real.